on to getting our project all set up. So there's going to be quite a bit of steps here, quite a few steps. It's basically going to go like this. We're going to clone the GitHub repository. So you'll see that this is currently private because I'm obviously still recording this, but for you guys, it'll be public. We'll have the link below for you. What you'll need to do is you'll need to clone this. We're going to go through all the steps. I'm just going to go high level first. Once you have the repo cloned, we're going to install our packages. Super easy. Once we have that done, we need to set up SME. So SME is basically a tool that we're going to be using so that you can actually test webhooks on your computer. Okay, this is going to save you a ton of headache, and SME is super easy to set up. Then we're going to need to create our GitHub app. So in the demo that you saw, we're actually running this with what's called a GitHub app, which is basically just our bot that is hooked up kind of to the GitHub API and is handling all those events and things like that. Then once we have all that set up, we'll make sure that our environment variables are set up. Then we'll run the app, make sure everything works, and then we will be off to the races and we can actually start replicating the code. Okay, so let's actually start with cloning the repo. So what you guys are going to need to do is you're going to need to click the green code button here, and we're going to go ahead and copy the URL to the clipboard here. And we're going to go to a terminal. So you can see I have my terminal open here on my Mac, and I'm just going to run git clone, paste that URL. And you know what I'm actually going to do, guys? I'm actually going to go do this in my desktop folder. Okay, this is actually where I would prefer. I'm going to hit my arrow keys up to go grab. Actually, just kidding. I didn't run that. So we're going to go git clone, paste that again one more time. And I'm just going to call this level 1 agent tutorial because I'm doing a tutorial here. This is going to clone this entire code repository into a folder of this name. Okay, we're going to clone that. I'm going to do cd, and then I'm going to basically just change directory into this one. Okay, you can do all of this via your file system too. I just like the command line. I think getting familiar with the command line is helpful. So if you're someone who's really tempted to go use the file system, I recommend getting more familiar with the command line. Once it starts to click, you can move really fast. And then I'm just going to open this project in Cursor, which again, you can do via your file system, but I'm just going to go command line there. And boom, we have the code repository on our computer. Great. Now, the next step here is we're just going to use our terminal right here within Cursor. You may be using Windsurf or VS Code or an IDE that you prefer. In this course, we're going to continue to use Cursor. That's my IDE of choice. And once we have the terminal open here, again, you can use your own native terminal if you prefer a different terminal, but we're just going to run npm i. This is npm install shorthand. And this is just going to install all of the packages that we have in our library or in our project. So if we go to package.json, you can actually see what those are. So just to talk about for a brief second about what's going on here, what we're kind of using here is we are using Vercel's AI SDK to kind of wrap OpenAI's API. The AI SDK is one of the most popular AI libraries in the world. It basically just allows you to use the OpenAI API with a bunch of extra bells and whistles that you get for free with this library. And not only do you get that, but it also provides a very unified interface to use the other APIs as well. So say you wanted to use Claude 3.5 Sonnet, maybe you want to use a Google model, test that in this project, see if those models work for this particular agent. You're more than welcome to do so. The AI SDK has really good docs on how to do that. And you basically would just install at AI-SDK / say Anthropic, and then you could easily swap in those models with very little code changes needed. Okay, so we're going to be using that. We're going to be using OctoKit. So this is a GitHub package. It's basically just a really convenient library to use the GitHub API. So that's going to be really easy. We're going to be using XML to JS, which is just a nice XML parsing tool. We're going to be building an Express server. So this is a node-based server that we're going to be using. We have a couple helpers like Body Parser here to help us get JSON responses. If some of this is like totally just going over your head right now, don't worry. It's honestly not that important. I'm just trying to give a little bit of a helpful start here. And then you can use, we'll definitely be using SME client here for our webhooks. And then one thing to note is you will need, we're going to be running our code with TSX. This is basically a way to compile our TypeScript to JavaScript and run it very easily. This is called TypeScript execute. That's what that X stands for. You may need to install that on your computer. It's very easy. It's basically npm i-g tsx, and that installs TSX globally on your computer. If you run into issues with that, all the AI models know how to do that really well. So just go ask your preferred AI model, especially if you're in Cursor, right? That's one of the great things about Cursor Chat. So you can ask those types of questions right within your IDE. And then we're going to be using something called NodeMon. So all this fancy line of the code here, all this is doing is basically, because we're going to be running a server, one of the things that happens when you're iterating on servers and you're running those locally and you're trying to test very quick iterations, anytime you save your file, the server will actually restart so that the fresh code gets used for the server. Which for newer developers isn't super obvious. So NodeMon kind of helps us get around the issue of having to manually do that over and over and over and over. So let's direct your attention to a few things. So you'll notice we have a .env.example file. What you're going to need to do is you need to go create a .env.local file. Okay, .env.local. And what you need to do is you need to copy all of these keys here from the example file, and you need to paste those into the local file. Okay, so this is where we're going to be putting our OpenAI API key, our GitHub keys. We'll also actually need our, I can't remember what I actually called this. I need to actually update the repo. Let me actually go grab, I'm going to cut really quick, guys. I actually got to go grab that extra env so that you guys have that. So that value I was missing is the webhook proxy URL. That's what I called it. So I'll make sure that I add that and get things added to the repo here. So that's great. And what we want to do here is we actually need to go actually set up all these different things and make sure that everything is set up. So what we can do here is we can actually go to sme.io here. Okay, so I'm going to go to sme.io. So sme, like I said, this is basically a webhook payload delivery service. It's a really easy way to use webhooks locally on your machine. So what you are going to want to do, it's literally this easy, is we're going to click the start a new channel button, and you'll actually get this webhook proxy URL. What you're going to want to do is you want to go over to your .env.local here, not the example. Very important to not put your don't put the values in the example file, put it in the .env.local file. We have it set up so that you can't commit this to your GitHub repository and expose your secrets. So make sure that you paste it to this one. Okay. Also, quick note on ENVs, you want to treat all of these like they're secrets. Okay. Treat them effectively like they're passwords. You don't want people to see these. You don't want to share these with people. If people get access to these, like for example, if somebody gets access to your OpenAI API key, right, then they can use your API credits, right, which is really bad. They'll probably, people have horror stories where they leak a key, it gets hit by a bot farm, and they get a huge bill or something, right? We want to make sure that you're practicing good security here. So make sure to keep these secret. I'm obviously only sharing these because I'm doing the tutorial here. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to completely wipe all these keys before I publish. Okay, so I mention that all the time on Takeoff, but you want to make sure that you do that. So you'll also want to make sure that you install SME globally. Okay, so you can actually literally just copy that. Mine's already installed, but you're going to want to paste that in your terminal and run that. And that is going to install the SME client, and then you will be all set. Okay, so this is going to automatically get us a webhook proxy URL, which is basically the way we're going to be setting up our GitHub app in just a few seconds here. And that's what is going to listen for those events so that our agent knows when to trigger. So next step is going to be creating the GitHub app. Okay. So what you're going to want to do is you need to go to github.com/settings/apps. This is going to take you to the developer settings here. And what you can do here, so the top right, once you're on the GitHub app tab, we can actually create a new app. Looks like it's actually asking for my 2-factor authentication. Okay, again, we're always practicing good security here to make sure things are good. So let me get this filled in here, and then we'll cut to the next page. So we're gonna have to fill out a few pieces of information here. So what we'll do is we'll just call this. I'm just gonna call this level 1 agent PR bot or something. I think this has to be a unique value. So sometimes you'll have to do, when you're making these for development purposes, you'll have to add like some numbers or something just to make sure that this can pass. We'll see if that's taken or not. What we're going to need to do for the homepage URL is we're just going to go localhost 3000. What we can actually do is we'll just go ahead and copy this so we get that full URL there. Okay, so we want to put localhost 3000 in because we're going to be developing locally. And then what you need to do is scroll down to webhook. Okay, so this is important. So you need to go copy this SME URL here, because what we're doing in our code, we're basically forwarding our webhook request from the GitHub API to our local host via this URL. So this is what tells GitHub to actually forward the webhooks to. Okay, very important that you paste in the correct SME URL there. And that's going to be great. Okay. And then one thing that we will need is we need to go to repository permissions. And what we need to do is you need to access your code content here. So you need to go to contents and you need to change this to read and write. We're also going to have to make sure metadata is enabled, which that's enabled by default. And then for pull requests, we're going to want to go to read and write for pull requests as well, because we're doing PR bots. Okay. So that's what you're going to want there. And then for subscribe to events, right, we want to subscribe to pull request events, right, because the event that we're subscribing to here is going to be when a pull request is open. So very important that you check this. And once you have that all configured, you're probably just going to want to make sure it's only on this account. You don't want this to be a public app. This is kind of an internal tool. So once you have all of those things set up, very, very important that you do it exactly how I did it above. It's some of you are inevitably going to run into errors. If you do run into errors with running your app, it's probably something on this page almost 90% of the time. So just come back to this and verify that you got everything right. Okay, but you're going to want to create your app, and a few things are going to happen here. Okay, so first you want to grab your app ID here. We're going to go put our app ID as an environment variable. Okay, you're going to need a private key. So what you'll actually want to do is you're going to scroll all the way down here and you'll see this generate a private key. Okay, you're going to want to click that. You're going to get this weird .pem file. Okay, and what you need to do, if we open this up here, we'll show this in Finder actually. What we're going to do is we're going to open with, and we actually want to open this with a text editor. So you just need to get that file open in a text editor. I'm going to show you what I normally do on Mac. This is obviously going to be different for everybody, especially depending on what operating system you're on. Okay, but I'm just going to open up this in TextEdit. Very important. Make sure that you do not share this with anybody. And what's going to happen is you need to copy this entire value here and paste it right into this GitHub private key. Okay, just like this, including with this begin RSA stuff. We'll parse that automatically, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so you need to grab that key. Obviously, it comes in this secret file that you don't want to ever expose to anybody. Very important that you do that. So we can close that up. And the next thing that we want to do here is we want to go to our GitHub apps here. We want to click on our installation here. And then we want to go to install app. Okay, and this is where you're going to install your app on your repository. So you can install this to all repositories. I'm just going to do that. If you want to only install on specific ones, you're more than welcome to do that too. Actually, it's probably better that we do this so that we don't subscribe to every repo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the level 1 agent code. So this is this very own repo. I'm going to install that app on this repo. And then what you'll see here in the URL is you'll see this installation ID. This is this number at the very end. This is the last value that you're going to need. So you're going to need to copy that value, go over to GitHub installation ID and paste that. Okay. So you now have those 3 GitHub values. You have your app ID, you have your private key, and you have that installation ID. So the last step here is going to be going to OpenAI. Okay, so I'm just on platform.openai.com/API-keys. I'm going to create a new API key. I'm going to call this level 1 agent code tutorial, just to make it very clear to me what this is. Again, you don't want to ever expose this. I will delete this key once I'm done with this video. But you can paste that in as our final environment variable here. And now, boom, we have our OpenAI key. We have the 3 different values that we need for GitHub. And then we have our SME proxy URL. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to basically get this all ready for setup. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to set up I want to set up a new repository here. So what we're going to go do is I'm going to go to my GitHub page here. I'm going to go to my profile, go to repositories here, and click new. And I'm just going to call this level 1 agent tutorial here. We'll keep this private. Then I'm going to create a new repository. And what I'm going to do here is, and I'm actually going to have to, well, let me actually check this. This should have, yeah, so what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to do git rename origin to upstream. You guys can see, even I sometimes forget codes. Git remote. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just renaming my branch here. And then if I run this again, you can kind of ignore what I'm doing because I think for you, it's probably going to be a little bit different. But basically we want to copy this bottom code here. We want to add this. And if I run git push here, this should push my repository to, push my code to this new repository. Okay. So awesome. One thing that you'll notice though, is I will actually have to go back to my GitHub app here. I'm going to have to go install this on the new repository and then save that so that the pull requests listen for this repository as well. Okay, so that's very important. And then we should be all good to go. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do here is on my development instance here, we're going to do, and I'm just going to use the UI for this. If you want to use the command line, you're more than welcome to. It's very easy to ask an LLM to create a new branch for you and then run it. But I'm just going to create a new branch and we're going to just call this dev. Okay, so this is where we're going to be writing our code and then we can kind of do pull requests here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this my-agent file here. So what you'll notice is the agent.ts file. This has all of the 378 lines of code or whatever, plus all the comments. You can see we actually added comments to make sure that you could really easily figure out what's going on with this agent. And then if you want to write the code from scratch yourself and kind of practice, you can do that here. Okay, and we have 2 commands for you. So if you go to package.json, if you run npm run example, this is going to run the agent.ts file. Okay, so this is going to run the, looks like I actually need to install nodemon. So what you can actually do is we can actually just run this in cursor chat here. This is hopefully going to get us that command. I also need to make note to add the nodemon to this. Apparently I did not add that to the development instance. But once that's done, you can run npm run example, and this is going to run that server. You can see it's forwarding to our SME URL correctly, to our local host on 3000. And at this point, our server is all ready to go. Okay, so we're basically running all of the server code that you see in this agent.ts file. Okay, so this means our server is running, and what we can do here is we're going to add a little bit of a comment that just says test comment. The reason we're going to do that is because we want to test if we create a pull request in our repository. Remember, this is only going to work on repositories where you installed that GitHub app that you created. So what we'll do is we'll create a new pull request here. I'm also going to need to push this branch to main, or push to dev rather. Push to dev, publish the branch. Okay, this needs to go to tutorial. This is the origin. Now, if I refresh this, we should be able to see our dev branch. Sure enough. Okay, so we want to merge dev into main. This is the changes that were made. So if we create pull request here, we should be able to have our bot run. So let's make sure that that works. Okay, and it looks like we actually got a small error here. So let me go investigate this. I may have done a slight syntax error in the environment variable section. So let me go ahead and check on that for you guys. So this is what we need to do to fix this. This is a slight syntax error I made. This is what real world development looks like, right? Sometimes you run your server and you get an error. You got to go figure out what's wrong. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into our environment variables here, and I'm going to paste this in. Okay, so for you guys, what's going to happen is you're going to want to make sure you have this line exactly like that. I'm going to make sure I have this in the example area so it makes life really easy on all of you. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get that RSA private key. You want to get all of the values in between kind of these lines here. And then we're just going to cut that. We're going to get rid of the old one. And then we're going to paste right between these two new line characters. Okay, so you can see this \n and then another \n right in the middle there. We want to paste our value. And then what we should be able to do is on Mac, I'm going to hit Control-C. I'm going to stop that server here. We're going to run it again. And now if we close our pull request here, go back to pull request tab, create a new one, select the dev branch. Okay, we're just doing the same thing all over again. I actually had to test this twice just to make sure. And then create the pull request. You can see if we go back to our server, we're not going to get that nasty error message. You can see the PR review bot waiting message is in fact there, which means things are working. And now hopefully we should be getting the correct XML from OpenAI's O1 model in just a sec with that review. Okay, so you can see in this case, if we click on our files changed on this pull request review, 3 files were changing. So you can see we added the env example, we added the test comment, and we added NodeMon as a development dependency. And sure enough, if we go back to the conversation tab, which is kind of the main tab here, you can see it's actually pointing out all of those exact things. Okay, so it works. This is how you get this agent all set up. Okay, so again, we're just running all of the code that you see in here on what's called an Express server. This is listening to webhooks, the GitHub API that we installed on our repository with that GitHub app we created, right? Again, that's where all of those values came from for all these envs, which again, you should keep these secret, are coming from. And once you hook everything up, once you get all the values everywhere, once you get the server running, once you correctly put in your RSA key, unlike the first version that we did, this obviously is the correct format that it's expected to run as, then everything works and you get an AI agent, right? So what's happening at a fundamental level is our GitHub app is basically listening to changes on this repository. When it detects a pull request open, right? This is why we checked that checkbox that said listen to pull request events, right? In the subscribe section, we're subscribing to pull request events. And then in our code, I'll actually show you in the code where this happens. You can see, where is OctoKit here? Okay, so you can see if payload.action equals opened and event type is pull request. So this is where in the code we're actually listening to open pull requests. Then it tells our AI agent, hey, so if we go to O1 here, where's O1? Okay, right, this is where the text generation is happening. This is where we're using that prompt to get the format we want, right? This is how all of that's happening, right? This is a task executor at work. This is a level 1 AI agent that is actually doing stuff. So that's all the setup stuff. That's all you need to run it. Highly recommend you go look at this code. We will be doing another lesson where we actually kind of write this from scratch to kind of communicate what some of the core principles are that are going on here. But this is like level 1 of building code automation agents, right? This is, again, this is a level 1 agent, so we're not doing anything too crazy here. But I mean, this is like a legitimately useful thing to do. Obviously, the prompt that you write is going to influence how useful this is, right? One of the things that you might want to do is improve the prompt and tell the AI agent exactly how you like your code in particular, right? And that can customize things per your project, per how you like to write code, right? There's so much flexibility in how useful you can make these things, right? And it's often just, how you prompt it with something like this, especially for task executors when it's the whole thing is pretty much like one prompt listening to some sort of a trigger, right? That's kind of basically what a task executor is at its very core. So definitely recommend you mess around with that. We'll go ahead and move on to the next lesson. But that is how you get this thing running. That's all the environment variables you need. Again, I'm going to keep mentioning this just because security is so important. Is make sure you don't leak those keys. I'm actually going to have to go delete all mine right as we speak. But yeah, that's a level 1 agent, and we'll actually move on to building it.